Hello and welcome back. Thank you to all our fabulous listeners that have been following us for the last couple of years. I really want to tell you how much I enjoy doing these podcasts. I love learning, I love teaching, and I love sharing whatever I've learned with you guys, our audience. We have asked Bushy Martin to join us today. Now, Bushy and I have been doing quite a lot of conversations, let's say, over the last month or so, and we've been having fantastic conversations. I've been on Bushy's podcast a couple of times that we're going to go into, and we've decided to invite Bushy on board with us, and he's got some absolute dynamite information that he's going to be sharing with you today. So just in short, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Bushy Martin. If you don't know him already, and I'm sure most of you do, Bushy Martin is the founder of Know How Property Finance Strategist. He's the anchor of Australia's longest running and most popular property show, Realty Talk, host of the Get Invested podcast, and award-winning author of the Freedom Formula, resulting in his recognition as one of Australia's top 10 property specialists. He's on a mission to wake up and shake up hard-earning Australian families as Get Invested as their future to attain and maintain their ideal lifestyles. Bushy is a property investment strategist, turnaround, award-winning author, educator built on the strengths of his own international portfolio, and as founder of Know How Property Strategist, has helped over 2,000 hard-working Aussies, to secure, get this, over $1 billion worth in property on their way to achieving their lifestyles. Those, I think, are a couple of accolades. Welcome, Bushy.
Thank you, Mish. I've been looking forward to this chat. We've had some great chats, as you mentioned, on Realty Talk, and a big deep dive coming up on Get Invested shortly. So really looking forward to that. But very humbled and honoured to join you on your podcast, Mish.
Thank you, Bushy. It's an honour having you with me today. So we're going to be talking about some really, really interesting stuff, and we don't usually delve into this on this podcast, but I'm super excited to be sort of branching out, and I think this is the information that most people want to know that you're going to be delivering today. So tell us a little bit about living by design, not default. Let's just dive straight into it and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I guess that catch cry really comes out of my own background to a fair degree, Mish. You know, I started life as an architect and was actually an architect for 17 years, working on projects all over Australia and internationally into Asia and beyond. And what I didn't realise until I got into the property investment space and started helping others is that I took for granted that you always start with the end in mind, get a very clear picture on exactly how things need to look and feel, and then work backwards to look at, okay, what step do I need to now start taking to get there? And what made that pretty obvious is the first question we ask every potential property investor is, what does your ideal life look like? And I normally get crickets, or I get these looks to the sky and, oh, hell, Bushy, I'd never actually thought about that. And my own view of that, Mish, is that if you're not clear on how you want to live and how much that lifestyle costs, so you can sustain that lifestyle long term, then how are you going to know what type of property to invest in, where to achieve your end goals? So I guess I get a little bit frustrated by Australians generally in that I think, way too many Australians use the excuse of I'm too busy to allow life to happen to them, rather than taking it by the horns and starting to live with intent, and therefore designing your life, getting crystal clear on exactly how you want to live, and then crafting a strategy around that lifestyle, around the financing that needs to then supplement that. And then finally, the property strategy will fall out of the bottom of that. That means that you're going to be identifying the right type of property in the right location at the right time, structured in the right way, that's going to contribute to your ultimate destination, which is living by design and enjoying the sort of lifestyle that you've always wanted to enjoy, but either thought you couldn't or have given up on it because life's got too hard.
I really like that's absolutely awesome, Bushy, the way you're talking about architecture, because yes, you're 100% right. You've got a block of land, you pop a house on there. What is the house going to look like? that's all beautiful and that's eye candy. But the hard work really begins when you start looking at what it's going to cost you to build that house, who's going to build it, the builder, the architect, the design, the engineering, the plumbing, and you go into the granular of what it takes in order to achieve that. So looking backwards really it's an amazing, I can see now living by design where you've tied in architecture and lifestyle, living that lifestyle. So think about what your ultimate dream is. Do you take the audience to retirement age or
Yeah, absolutely. Now I need to reinforce here, Mish, that I'm not a financial planner. I'm not an accountant. So what I'm sharing here is general information that has worked really well for myself and my partner in all things, Sonia. It's an approach that we use with everyone that we work with, but it's really about sitting down, Mish, and letting go all the boundaries and the restrictions that we place upon ourselves and saying, right, what does my perfect day, week, month, and year look like? What are my bucket list items? What are the things I really want to achieve in life? And then it's pretty easy to actually monetize that. So if you've got a pretty good picture on exactly how you want to live, how much travel you want to do a year, how often you need to wait out, what sort of clothes you want, what sort of car you want to drive, and then it gets down to breaking those numbers down, but it doesn't take long to work out how much per year that lifestyle costs. And then it's pretty easy to translate that into the nest egg number that you're going to need that's going to fund that exercise. So this sort of bridges us nicely into what I refer to as the freedom numbers, Mitch. And the freedom numbers are a part of what I call a triad strategy. So I've read and researched and continue to read and research successful people in all walks of life.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen, particularly in the investment space, is that, as I've sort of touched on, and I call it a strategy, not a strategy. So it's a play on words, but I just can't help myself when it comes to words, because it's if you start with the end in mind and then you get clear on how you want to live, you monetize that in terms of what that lifestyle costs. That folds into the nest egg number that you need to invest in that will ultimately then fund and provide the cash flow that will give you the time back to do the things that you want to enjoy. Then once we've got to those that point, we then put some shape around the freedom numbers. And the freedom numbers are, developed a fairly rudimentary freedom forecaster, as we call it. And again, I'm not licensed to advise on that, but it's worked really well for us and others that we've assisted. And it means breaking down 4 key numbers. So I've talked about your lifestyle income. How much per year do you need to live the way you want? That core question, how much is enough for you? Yes. Not the Joneses, the next door neighbours, or what you should be doing on Insta, but what is the right number to live the way you truly want to live? And that's getting really in touch with your values and what's important to you, and then putting some shape around that. Then we need to combine that with the break-free timeline. So how many years before you want to be in a position where your investments are going to fund that lifestyle? So that's your break-free timeline. Then the next one that folds out of that is your do-nothing number. So your do-nothing number, if you just continue to do what you're already doing, where's it going to get you to? And if that number's enough, let's say, let's take a typical example. Maybe I'll put some numbers around this, Mish, because it starts to make some sense.
Yeah,
let's say that.
Say to you, if you could throw some numbers at it, I think that would really, help us understand.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. Let's say that your lifestyle income number is $120,000 a year.
Right.
And that's enough to do everything that you need to do. And there's a big assumption here. And the assumption is at that point in time, you've eliminated all debt, you own your home freehold, so you're not paying the bank any money. 120 grand, and I've done a fair bit of research on this, is enough to give you a comfortable sort of lifestyle. So that'll allow you an overseas trip a year, a couple of interstate holidays. You can eat out a couple of days a week. You've got enough money to repair the house and drive a decent car and have your hair cut and do all of the niceties of life. About 120 grand will give you that. And let's say you want to be in that position in 20 years' time. So 20 years is your break-free timeline. And I need to emphasise my own prejudice here in the context that, all the research I've done over many years suggests that you need to be holding property at least for 15 years and beyond to really achieve the sorts of results that you're after. And, I get a bit frustrated, Mish, with a lot of players in the game saying that property doubles every 7 to 10 years. If you actually do the research, on average, it takes 15 years for a location to go through a complete cycle. So for me, it needs to be a minimum of 15 and hopefully 20. So let's say in this case, your break-free timeline is 20 years. That means that the nest egg number that you need to provide that 120 grand a year, based on a 5% net return on whatever it is that you invest in, means that you need to accumulate $2.4 million worth of income-producing assets. And I emphasize income-producing because your home costs you money, doesn't put money in your pocket.
Yep.
So I'm excluding the home from that asset base. And we need to remember here that 54% of Australians' wealth is in their home currently. So what I'm suggesting here is a home's not enough. You have to live somewhere. It's not giving you an income. Yes, it looks good on the balance sheet, but it's not actually feeding you. So we need to exercise that from the whole equation. And then let's say that, again, let's do some examples. Let's have a look at, if we project forward to look at your do nothing number. So if you're not going to do anything differently, let's say you've got 215 odd grand in super at this point in time, and you've got, say, 55 grand in cash floating around in an offset account or savings account, whatnot. If you project forward over that 20-year break-free timeline, based on the average growth of those assets over time, and then taking off the inflation every year from that, and I use about 2.65% as the average inflation rate, which is about where it looks long-term. It hasn't in the last couple of years, clearly.
I was going to say that's very conservative, but anyway.
But if you look before COVID, the average over the last 50 years has been about 2.65%. And it's within that, the RBA likes to keep it between 2 and 3%, and 2.65 is about where it looks. So if you project forward, let's assume that you're working and you're putting in the minimum compulsory super into that year after year, because there's an allied story here, and that is that a lot of Australians still assume, chasing the Australian dream, that paying off the home and putting money into super is going to give them a reasonable lifestyle. Well, what I'm about to demonstrate here is that's going to leave you way short of where you need to be, because if you had a 215 in super and 55 odd grand in cash and you projected it out 20 years, you're going to end up with a total nest egg of about 668,000 roughly over that time frame. And again, assuming you're not going to spend the principal, you're going to live off the proceeds of a nest egg, because as soon as you start spending the nest egg, it becomes a negative spiral, and next thing you know, you've got nothing left. Let's say you're living off the proceeds of it, then that 668 is going to give you about 33 grand a year to live on. Now, 33 grand a year is less than the combined pension at the moment, which is about 35 grand. And I'm not going to bore you with the statistics on it and what that means, but 33 grand a year, or even the pension, full pension, is a very miserable, penny-pinching, poverty-stricken lifestyle, Mish. And there's a lot of Australians that are heading exactly, they're like the Pied Piper heading towards the cliff. They don't see it coming, but I feel sorry for those that end up in that situation. But that means that if we're still trying to get back to that nest egg number of 2.4 mil, then today, in 20 years' time, we're going to be 1.7 mil short. Now, that sounds like a big number in 20 years' time, but again, if I take off the inflation from that number to get it back to what does it mean today, that's about 880 grand, which is what I would call the number now. And in property terms, that's anywhere between 1 and 2 properties. So those freedom numbers start to put some shape around what you need to do. And the key number to remember there, the real freedom number is, in this case, is 880,000. So that's the amount you would need to secure now to ensure that you reach your lifestyle income in 20 years' time.
So, Bushy, when you're saying secure now, you're talking about purchase a property at around about 880 odd thousand, right? And that one property at 880 odd thousand is going to leverage you within 15 to 20 years to where you need to be. So, which means that if you buy 2 of those properties, you could virtually double that. And that is where compounding your assets is going to build your wealth, right? Okay. Now you're working on a factor of 5% yield. Is that a gross yield or a net yield?
That's net yield at the end of the day. So,
okay. So that's quite conservative in residential. I mean, particularly in the current market. And I'm just going to throw a little commercial spin in here because I have to,
Of course you do.
being the commercial animal I am. So I would love to have a look at those figures and see what the difference is if we're averaging at between 6 and or 7%. I mean, ultimately right now, properties, the acquisition yield in the current market, I'm going to say is circa that 6% currently. It was 7%. It's dropped down a little bit. However, you want to get your commercial properties as close to that 7% and growing thereafter. And I think therein lies the beauty of that compounding, building wealth ultimately into your future. So
Absolutely.
Great with those numbers.
Yeah, and again, the freedom forecast enables you to model all of that. You can change the return rates, you can change the timelines, you can change the income. Yeah, it enables you to actually start playing with that and doing best, worst, likely case scenarios. But it really starts with the important thing here is to create a magnet and a compass that's going to guide you as a GPS towards where you want to get to. Because again, I way too many people, and you probably see the same, Mish, you ask them, okay, why are you investing in property? Oh, I want to make money. Or that's as furry as it just, you might as well be a white elephant in the mist with that, because it gives you no clarity around what you're doing and why you're doing. And more importantly, because you and I both know, success in property is a long-term game. And that means you really need to develop patience, persistence, discipline, and determination muscles to override the inevitable speed bumps that you're going to occur along your journey. And it doesn't matter what you invest in, there are going to be issues and challenges. But if the end game is magnetic enough and you're excited about it and you're motivated about it, then you're going to climb over all of those speed bumps and walk across the broken glass that's going to enable you to get there. But also it means that you've got a compass that enables you to go, okay, every day, is this decision I'm going to make going to take me closer towards where I want to live or further away? And suddenly you've got that GPS that's giving you some guidance on where you're heading. And that's the first step. So that's what you want to do. What you then need to look at is, what can I do? And that's where I apply what I call the bare facts assessment. So the bare facts, again, if you haven't picked this up already, Mish, I'm a man of shocking acronyms. I just can't help myself.
I've noticed.
Yeah, it's just
you love articulate, you love details, and you love acronyms. And I think that is fantastic. I think it's awesome. More people like you, please.
Well, it's just easy to remember, Mish. I find that if you've just got some clear things in your head, then it's really easy to imprint them and then make them work. But the bare facts, if I break bear as in the grizzly bear, down into the four letters, B is for borrowings, E is for equity, A is for affordability, and R is for risk. So if we look at that, what I see a lot of property investors do is they only focus on the first two, and that is, how much can I borrow and how much equity can I contribute to look at how much I can spend on a property. And for me, that's only half the equation. The important bit is the A and the R. Mm-hmm. And the A is about exactly how much per week is a property going to put in my pocket or take out of my pocket once every expense involved in both purchasing and holding the property is concerned, weaving in any depreciation or tax benefits that goes into that, to look at that true affordability piece. Because if we're holding a property for 15 years plus, we've got to make sure that we're going to be able to ride the inevitable changes in our lifestyle that occur over that time, the inevitable pressures on the property from vacancy periods, damage to the property, and changes in interest rates and everything else, to make sure that we are actually in a position to afford that property without it biting significantly into salary savings or lifestyle. Because if you're living on baked beans and dog food while you hold on to a property, you're not likely to be holding on to it for very long. So that rolls into the risk component. So if we don't have a strong rainy day reserve, contingency funds, we're not purchasing the property in the right sort of entities that assist the cash flow, and also look at asset protection, and also the long-term tax impacts at the other end of the journey, then we haven't really considered everything that we need to. So if we combine the freedom numbers with the bare facts, we're getting back to a purchase price that's affordable, And depending on all of that, that then rolls into what I like to call the capital growth to cash flow curve. Now, I'm a very visual communicator, and it's going to be a little bit hard to put some shape around this, but you and I both know that compounding growth is an exponential curve. So you don't see much improvement at all for a good 50 to 60% of the time, and then things really start to improve. If you project on your current asset value that we worked out in the freedom numbers into where that's going to get you to on your break-free timeline, that starts to give you much more definitive ideas on whether you should be going for capital growth or going for cash flow. Now, most investors, if they're at the early stage of their exercise, need to be focusing on capital growth because, again, and it's a little bit different in the commercial arena, Mish, because there's much higher yields and therefore much stronger cash flow. But it's unlikely that one or two properties and the rent that you get, whether it's commercial or residential, is going to be enough to fund your retirement. So if you focus on growth and make it affordable growth so you can hold on to it long enough, then once your projected freedom numbers are going to exceed or equal your nest egg number, then anything you invest on from that point is focused on cash flow. So why is that important? Because the types of properties and the way you structure them, the locations of them, will then be determined and driven by that. So traditionally, and again, I'm talking about first-time investors who don't have perhaps the equity to be able to get into commercial property early on, will focus on higher growth houses in tightly held areas and not invest in units and apartments that have a high yield but don't increase growth. In the context of what I like to call the capital growth to cash flow curve, it starts to determine what types of properties you invest in when. So if your key focus is growth, so let's say that your freedom numbers suggest that you're going to be short on where you need to be, then focus on high capital growth properties. And for first-time investors or early investors who just don't have the equity or maybe borrowing capacity, then focusing on residential properties that are high growth, like houses on a separate block versus units and townhouses, which are higher yielding but generally lower growth. What that allows you to do is focus on that. And then when your projected freedom numbers are going to be equal to or beyond what your freedom number needs to be, that nest egg number, then you focus on cash flow assets. And the other important thing here is it's not a set and forget exercise. Your strategy needs to evolve with time. So that's why I use the expression, go for growth and then convert to cash flow. So in the run-ups to the time when you're going to work less or not work at all, then over a series of financial years, so that you're not doing it all in one hit and giving all the capital gains to the tax office, you start to transition your growth assets into cash flow assets. So, and those cash flow assets, either before or after, are more likely to be commercial property, where there's much higher yield and the tenant's inheriting most of the cost, and that's leaving more of the pie in your pocket, not someone else's. Then you've got the ability to transition this portfolio as you're swinging from growth to cash flow to then fund your lifestyle, get your time back, and circle back to living by design and putting your energy into things that are important to you and your family.
Awesome. I think that's absolutely awesome. Now, I'm going to cheat here a little bit and ask you if you have a couple of these charts maybe that we can put out there together with this recording so that people can just have a general idea. Static charts, absolutely fine. But I think you've nailed it. And most of the investors that we speak to have come through that residential journey and then moving on to the commercial journey for that exact reason. And everybody wants cash flow, obviously. Everybody wants the golden goose at the end of the day, to lay that egg. This is really fantastic. You mentioned earlier it was around borrowing, equity, affordability, and risk. Now, you say that most people look at the borrowing and the equity, obviously, to see what is affordable for them, and then the affordability and the risk. So in residential purchasing, obviously the first couple of years until you're waiting for that property to experience market growth, do you have a time period on that, or do you work with people based on time period, based on their individual sort of circumstances? How do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we circle back to those freedom numbers, and we get crystal clear on what is their break-free timeline, because everyone's different, Mish. There's no one size fits all for this. But the duration that you're holding the property will also influence what you're investing in and where to some degree, because we want to be trying to identify locations that are in the upswing of their growth cycle, not in the flat period. And again, you would know this as well as I. What we tend to see in property generally over a sort of that 15-year average period is that locations will go through a fairly strong growth spike over 2 to 5 years. Then quite often the value will come off 5 to 10% because it's like a spring that's sprung too far, and then it settles back down a little bit. And then quite often it'll go sideways for 5 to 8 years before there's new infrastructure, industry or income drivers that are going to create the next spike in growth. So yes, that time frame becomes really important, because if you come to me and say, right, I want to retire in 5 years, and you haven't got much under your belt, then I'm probably going to say to you, well, yeah, good luck with that. It's not likely to happen unless you've got massive buying capacity and a considerable amount of equity you can throw at something, and most people don't. Because most people get into their mid-50s and they have what I like to call their oh shit super moment. Oh shit, I haven't got enough super to survive. And then they're suddenly asking people to pull rabbits out of hats and produce unachievable results in a very quick time frame. But for me, you've got to have at least 10 years and preferably 15 years. And then depending on where you're at in relation to your current asset base, that will, again, start to dictate the property strategy in terms of, is it growth, is it cash flow, is it a combination, and where's that heading, and where are we within the growth cycle of that particular location that's going to assist you in that equity growth in particular.
Okay, so in a nutshell, when a client comes to you, they come to you for a strategy. They come to you for a long-term strategy. So the younger they come to you, what clients at what age is the best age for them to reach out to you, let's say? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between those that do and those that should. Because, the one regret I have, Mish, is that I didn't start early enough.
Yeah.
So if I had my time...
I want to ask you what age you were when you did start?
Yeah, well, I had an early life crisis at 33, Mish, where I was basically wiped out and I lost everything. I was burnt out, broken and broke at 33. I jokingly say at that stage, all I had to my name was an old bashed up car and a bunch of cassettes, because I'd lost my marriage. I'd pretty much lost everything. And it was a massive wake up call for me, Mish, and I was determined not to make the same mistake again, because the reality is we take ourselves with us, and the colour of the box may change, but we're still at the centre of that. So I had to have a really good look at myself and how I needed to change as a person in all aspects, how I thought, my expectations, my attitudes, my outlook. And I basically rebuilt from that stage. I make the joke, Mish, that my life's in two halves. It's BC and AD. So BC is before my crisis and AD is after my divorce, because it was at that point that I really seriously started investing at that period of time. But the simple maths is, the longer you've got, the easier this is.
Yep.
I'd be suggesting anyone who's in the workforce needs to start thinking about that overarching triad strategy. Set the goalposts early, and then you've got something to work towards. If you're in your mid-50s, it's getting pretty hard to make that happen, because not only are you at the end of the journey and you don't have a lot of time left, but lenders, a big part of our business is the financing. The lenders now look very differently at someone who's 55 as compared to someone who's 45 or 35.
So I think there are a couple of messages that I'm hearing in this, and I really love this. If you're in your 30s, 40s, and you're not doing this already, well, hell, jump on the wagon and get this going right now. That's the one takeaway. And, I'm very fortunate. I woke up very early in life. I started at 22 years old. However, as I think most people know, I had to dump it and start all over again 10 years ago. So I'm at that period where I've started in my 50s, okay? Different life, different country, starting all over. But the great thing is I brought my knowledge with me. But the second takeaway I was going to say is, if you've got young kids, and you're not teaching this stuff to your kids. You're doing them such an injustice. Teach your kids from a young age so that they are prepared when they hit their working years, 18, 19, 20, that they start thinking about this stuff and they start seeing it, and they have the maturity of mind to see that this is where they should be going.
Absolutely. And just adding to that really important message, Mish, there's two things I suggest anyone listening to this does. One, buy Rich Dad, Poor Dad for kids and start reading to your kids at night. And secondly, buy the cash flow game, which is a Robert Kiyosaki game, and it's like Monopoly on steroids. So it's actually, and it's a lot of fun. I've played it. You can actually play it online now. So we're all in a digital world, so you can play it online. But it actually makes fun. All the key principles are going to assist you to live the way you want to live. Investing in quality assets that are going to sustain and maintain your lifestyle long term. And you're right, if we inculcate that right at an early age and do it in a fun way that doesn't feel like it's a maths exam, then it becomes part of the habits and the normal way of thinking that our young adults on the next generation is going to move into. And what a better place Australia will be when people can fund their own lifestyles, not relying on the government to be providing safety nets and everything else that goes with it. We can transform this country nearly by enabling our kids to have some fun with this right from the get-go.
Absolute spot on there, Bushy. And, I started very late in life with my family. I only started at 41 with my family, so my kids are still young teenagers. And whenever we go on holiday, we actually play those games. And it's unbelievable because the first time we played, I adapted all my real estate strategies and I cleaned up the board. And my two daughters watched that. It was quite interesting. My youngest daughter dived in, approached exactly the same strategy, and she cleaned all of us up. So this is really, really, we might joke about it, and yes, it's just the game and whatever, but psychologically it makes such a huge difference because my oldest daughter has never been good at Monopoly or any of these money games, but now she's older, she's 17, she's looking at this and she's thinking, now she's wanting to get involved in my business and know a little bit more about what I'm doing, which I'm thinking, yay, I'm doing my job right. So teach them from a very young age. And I think everything that you've gone through today is absolute gold. Now, Bushy, where can people reach out to you to find out more, what services you offer and what you can do for them?
Yeah, the easiest way, Mish, is two things. Jump on knowhowproperty.com.au. The podcast and everything's attached to that. So if you want to start having a listen to the information that we share, like yourself, to educate others to start live with intent and taking control of their own destiny, do that. Because there's really only four things that we do as a business. One is the education piece, which is part of what we're doing together today. Secondly is that very important strategy piece, which we've gone into a fair bit of detail today. Thirdly, we've got a niche investment broking business that focus on financing people's investments, because property is definitely a game of finance. It makes or breaks your capacity, your cost and your risk. And then the final component that we assist people with is becoming their orchestra leader and keeping all of the players in their team honest. Because I don't know about you, Mish, but I get very frustrated by a lot of so-called experts who bury people with BS, to be honest, in kilos of information, but what they're actually delivering at the end of the day is questionable in terms of whether it's the right fit for their clients. So we become the John West of property for a lot of investors, to sit on their side of the table, become their eyes, ears, arms and legs, to make sure that what's actually being putting forward is truly in their best interest and not someone else's. So do that. Jump on bushymartin.com.au as well if you want to check me out personally. I'm happy to jump on and just do personal solutions sessions with individuals if they want to suss out where that might sit. So there's a range, a bit of a shopping cart of ways that we can assist people in that regard. But I love what you're doing, Mish, in the commercial space. I think commercial is the future. Yes, people might grind their teeth on residential, and because it's important to realise that as your knowledge increases and your comfort increases, you're in a better position to take on more complex and potentially more rewarding investment opportunities. And commercial it's the perfect next step in that regard. So I think from that lifestyle funding perspective, there's no better vehicle than commercial property. So it's a very important part to have in your portfolio.
In your back pocket.
Yes.
Have somebody in your back pocket. I think we're both very valuable to our audience, Bushy. Both to have in your back pocket. We are going to put all Bushy's links into the show notes. So be sure to go and have a look at the show notes. He's got a lot of links on Facebook. He's professional, the business notes, Instagram. We'll put all of that in show notes, and please feel free to reach out to either myself or to Bushy if there's anything, if you've got any queries, any questions. This has been a really great session. And guys, we've just scratched the surface. I'm loving chatting to Bushy, and the knowledge and the wisdom that he's bringing to us as an audience and to the show is absolute gold. So we'll probably be doing this again and again and again. So thank you, Bushy, again for joining me. It's been fun, and see you again on the next one.
Thank you very much, and very honoured and humbled to be here, and keep up the great work, Mish. It's awesome.
Thank you.